Good afternoon to everyone in Australia and New Zealand. It's 9:30 a.m. here in Leipzig and 9:30 in La Bretagne in France. Welcome to the third ANAM webinar, where today we'll be looking at the collaborative process. So there are many examples throughout history that show us the wonderful uniqueness of creations that resulted from artistic partnerships and collaborations. Mozart, De Ponte, Gilbert and Sullivan, Stravinsky, Diaghilev, Lennon and McCartney, just to name a few. What happens where two or more masterfully talented artists collaborate? And what are the challenges for such strong individuals to interact and cooperate? Today, we have the privilege of welcoming Barbara Hannigan. I almost said singer Barbara Hannigan, although that would be wouldn't be accurate at all, as Barbara has many strings to her bow. She's not only a singer, but feels equally comfortable on the podium as a conductor, and sometimes even does both at once. She's also a mentor to a young generation of musicians through her Equilibrium Young Artist program. And Barbara has given more than 85 world premieres during her career and is going to spend this morning with us reflecting on the life lessons, psychology, emotional and intellectual challenges she's experienced through her extensive career as a collaborator. So without further ado, joining us from France, welcome Barbara Hannigan.
Very happy to be here. This is the biggest Zoom I've ever done. So yeah, also a very technologically exciting moment.
Fantastic. So Barbara, just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Do you come from a musical family?
Yeah, so I come from Waverley, Nova Scotia. So that's east coast of Canada, from a village, small village, 500 people or so. And I would say my family are musical, certainly not professional musicians, but there was, my mom played piano and her mom played piano. And so it was a musical culture, let's say. Nova Scotia, like we have, I don't know, maybe you have the same in Australia, like the kitchen party. It's very normal to, if you have a party, that everybody ends up making music in the kitchen kind of thing. And I think the first important teacher for me was my mom, because she was singing with me and my twin brother and my sister and playing the piano with us from a really, really young age. Like she has tapes of us singing, before we could speak language, we could sing. So we could recall melodies and so on, like many kids can. And then around age 4, I started piano with the lady that lived up the street. And so I was taking piano lessons with her. And soon after that, I moved to a really good piano teacher. And that was very important because she was teaching harmony, sight singing, ear training at every lesson from about age 5 or 6 onward. And simultaneously, at the end of the little dirt road where we lived was our school. And we had a fantastic school music teacher. It was her first teaching job. And both her parents had studied at Juilliard. And she had also studied at a really good school in the States. And so
what
here we were.
What system do you have in Canada, the oral training system? Is it solfège, like in France?
Well, I don't know. No, it's not like in France. Like in France, it's incredible, the solfège that they do. No, we didn't have that. I mean, we learned do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. But I don't know if that was a program or if it just depended on the music teacher that you had. And our music teacher, she did ear training with us. There was a lot of joyful music making, and there was discipline as well. So at school I had it, and in my private lessons I had it. So that's how everything started. And I think for me, looking back, like I'm grateful for the joyous music making, and I'm also really grateful for the ear training and sight singing, because what I'm realizing is, or what I realized quite early on, but even now, that is a skill that is not something that everyone had. Even a lot of professional musicians, a lot of people tell me that they didn't get that until they were 15 or 16 years old. I'm like, really? You didn't study harmony and sight singing at every single lesson, and you didn't have to sing, all this material? And I thought that was just normal for people. So And even for singers, I mean, singers are some of the worst sight singers. So yeah, this
Not
kind
when
of
they do
grounding.
your repertoire though.
No, but yeah, so that's kind of how it started. And then the quick version is that I had good school music and choir camp and piano camp and all this kind of stuff in Nova Scotia until I was 17. Then I moved to Toronto, which is 2 hours away by airplane. I went to one of those FAME performing arts high schools in Toronto, and I finished my high school studies there. And then I continued on at the University of Toronto with a really fine teacher, Mary Morrison, who had also, I mean, she had sung all the legit roles, like the Mozart roles and Puccini and so on, but she also was married to a composer, and she'd worked with Stockhausen and Ligeti, and she'd sung a lot of world premieres as well. So I had this kind of, you know, strict bel canto discipline combined with you're a smart singer, you're curious, you like contemporary music. So she was very encouraging of me to explore the contemporary music. So that's the beginning. So now I'm 17 years old or 18 years old. I'm at university and starting my bachelor's degree in singing.
And where was that?
That was at the University of Toronto. So yeah, it's there in Canada. We have like, I think 2 major cities that you would go for the big studies, and that would be the University of Toronto, and that would be also Montreal. There's 2 schools in Montreal, 2 universities, one's French and one is English, and they both have really good music programs. So that would probably be the top 3 music programs in Canada.
And who have been your biggest musical influences sort of throughout your life? I mean, of course, we're students for the rest of our lives as musicians.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, it starts with your teacher. And when you have a teacher that you click with, that's really important. And I'm not so sure about how it is with instrumentalists, but in singing, you know, it's a very fine line, because you have to be, you can't see the instrument. So you can't really see a lot of things as to what the person is doing. For wind instruments, it's similar, of course, because of the breathing. But like, you know, for strings players, you can actually see position and technique and so on. And you cannot see that in singing. So it's a very intimate relationship. And one needs someone, I think, that is working in a very disciplined way, but that also allows you and encourages you to be self-sufficient and responsible for your own development. And that's what I really loved about my first teacher, Mary Morrison. We would go into the lessons and we'd work on technique. And as far as interpretation went, she didn't pay a lot of attention. I think she knew that was going to happen anyway. You know, I was going to come up with my own ideas naturally. So we were working on technical aspects of the music. And later I went to another teacher named Neil Seymour, who I've been with since I was 27. So now I'm 48. And I've been with him ever since. So for 21 years with this other teacher, and he took me to the next level, which was the level that I needed to be able to sing the crazy roles, the really, really intensely difficult technical roles, and to really incorporate those. So what he was teaching me was technical, but also a kind of emotional confidence to take on a role like Lulu. To fully incorporate, you know, the Donna Anna or Mélisande or Marie and Die Soldaten, like the really big meaty roles. I mean, you have to have a certain kind of confidence to be able to even sign the contract, you know, for those. So those were my 2 main teachers, you know. And then, but as far as guidance in other directions, I mean, composers, a lot of composers. I often say that the composers have taught me how to sing, because they demanded things of me that I didn't really know how to do, or they wanted a certain sound that didn't maybe exist in another piece, or I had to find a relevant reference to it. And that started, of course, with working with student composers when I was in university and even in high school, like at this FAME school. I think my first world premiere was when I was 17. And then, and then moving to work with Ligeti and Boulez and Duccio and Nussen and Stockhausen, and then the younger generation, which is Brett Dean and Gerald Berry and George Benjamin. So it's been pretty, and all of them have had an influence on me, and I think have really changed my approach to singing through each experience of each new piece.
Can you tell us a little bit about the works that have been written for you and what it was like collaborating with composers such as you mentioned, Written on Skin and Hamlet, George Benjamin, Brett Dean?
Yeah. Well, when I first started collaborating with composers, it was mostly student composers. And student composers, there's a lot of reinvention of the wheel with student composers because they don't know the whole repertoire. They don't know, what has been done, everything that's been done before. And so that was quite interesting because as I also didn't know the repertoire, there was a lot of really strange experimental writing going on. And then when I started working, for example, with, when I started singing the Ligeti or working with George Benjamin or Brett Dean, this was more, let's say, pure music as opposed to extended vocal techniques. I wasn't doing effects. And it was also a conscious choice for me to work with composers that were writing in a more lyrical way, because I felt that my instrument was able, to be a lyrical instrument, and I wanted it to be lyrical. And I didn't want to do, for example, a piece like Pierrot Lunaire, which is more for an actor who can sing.
Sprechstimme.
Right, Sprechstimme, speak singing. And so a piece like that I've been avoiding because I've been waiting until I can't sing anymore, and then I'll do that piece. But now I want to invest really in the pieces that demand the technique that I have. So, Lulu or the Webern pieces or Pli Selon Pli of Boulez or Ligeti Mysteries, those are all unbelievably demanding vocal pieces. And therefore, George Benjamin or Brett Dean will write for me based on their knowledge of my technique in that music. Mm-hmm. And the collaboration with each composer is totally different. I mean, it's really totally different. Some of them I'm very hands-on, and we have long sessions of discussion. And with other composers, it's like George Benjamin, we had one meeting, which was really important. And we played a game, which was fun. I later I named the game and called it George. And it was a game where we took a piece of staff paper and he wrote a note. And then I had to write what note I would like to sing next. And it wasn't harmonic. It was literally like technical, like what note would feel good to sing next. And then he would write another couple of notes, and we were not speaking at all. He'd write a couple more notes, and then I'd write a few more notes, so that eventually this went on for 15, 20 minutes. And it wasn't that we were composing a piece. It was purely about register. And through that, he discovered how my voice liked to move, where I wanted to avoid, and where I wanted to hang out. And if he wrote me several notes in one area and I moved quickly away from that area, he could see, like, it was a wonderful way to learn about tessitura as opposed to range, because mm-hmm. every singer has certain tessitura, or certain areas of the tessitura where they feel very confident, and every singer has their favorite notes, and there are also notes that that we want to avoid, or we want to avoid, like hanging out on that note. So touching it is fine, but then get out of there. And so that's how Written on Skin, that's why there's a lot of leaps in Written on Skin. That's why there's some really beautiful A flats, because George discovered that the high A flat is one of my favorite notes. And he discovered that I don't like to hang out in the passaggio, which is an octave above middle C, like the D to the F up there. That's called the passaggio. So it's like the narrowest part of the voice. I don't like to hang out there too much. So he could see that I wanted to avoid that. So all of this through this non-verbal game, which was amazing. And for Brett Dean's opera Hamlet, well, I don't think Brett and I spend a lot of time together in advance of Hamlet. Not in advance. He was there through the entire rehearsal process, which I'll talk about later. But in advance of it, we didn't have a big meeting. I mean, we knew each other since I came to the Melbourne Festival, which would have been somewhere around 2008, maybe. I sang at the Melbourne Festival. And that I remember meeting Brett then at the edge of the stage. He came up, I was rehearsing. And then it was not until 2013 or something that I was asked to sing in Hamlet, or maybe 2014 when he started writing. But he'd seen me sing so many times in Berlin, you know, with the Berlin Phil and so on. I mean, he knew my instrument. And so you know, we could have met and talked, but he could have also just watched a lot of videos and seen, okay, she can do this and this and this and this and this. And sometimes I'll just point a composer in the direction of certain scores. I'll say, look at Lulu, that's perfect for me. Or look at these Webern songs, opus 16, 17, 18, if you want pointillistic stuff, that suits me really well. Lyrical material, look at such and such a piece. Like look at Mélisande is also an aspect of the voice. And not just voice, but character, you know, because when a composer writes for you, they're not, especially for a singer, but I hope also for instrumentalists, they're not just writing for your voice, they're writing for your total instrument. And your instrument also includes your character, your soul. So it's your personality, but your soul, the emotions that you bring out on stage and with your voice. And so it is that very intimate process where, yes, I'm a channel for them, but they're also writing for some part of me that is very personal. And then also they're projecting themselves onto me, which is the third aspect. Like, you know, many composers have said to me, you're playing me. You know, like Pascal Dussepin said that to me for his opera Passion or Passion. There were two singers in it, one female and one male. And he said, you're me. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you play mostly me, aspects of me. So ever since then, every time I see Pascal Dussepin, I say, I am Pascal Dussepin. But it's really, it's a very intimate relationship. And there can be arguments, and there has to be a lot of room for forgiveness and negotiation and psychology. It's really a special process, and it's different with each person.
It's actually interesting. I was looking at some of your clips this morning, and one of the comments that was written under one of your excerpts on YouTube, someone wrote, "Who will replace her when she no longer sings this? She has had such a profound impact on the interpretation of modern repertoire." It's we were chatting earlier on about your relationship to some of these roles, and sometimes even the reluctance to keep singing them. Can you just tell us a little bit about that before we go to the next question?
Well, there are certain rules that because I created them like this, you know, so the staging is really on my body. And in opera, you have remounts. So there was then a tour of this, you know, Glyndebourne Opera does a tour, but the tour is always done with a younger cast, a less experienced cast, just around England. And so someone had to do this, right? But, you know, the productions I did of Lulu, like I usually do original productions. I don't do remounts. So I don't come into somebody else's part. So the staging is often very difficult because I like to be really physical on stage. So the Lulu was in point shoes, and it was really ballet kind of staging. And Written on Skin was also very much made on not just on my voice, but on my corporal behavior, let's say. But I felt that if I stay too long with a part, then it really is hard for anyone else to be associated with it, because they think of it, audiences may think of it too much as Barbara Hannigan instead of George Benjamin or Brett Dean. So I deliberately remove myself from certain pieces, and I open it up. And I encourage other people to do the pieces, and I say, I'm not going to sing this for the next 3 years. So any soprano that gets asked to do the piece knows that that they have a real chance at digging into the piece for a couple of years, not just for a one-off, you know. And especially with all the effort that it takes to learn a contemporary role, you want to know you're going to do it more than once, you know. So I do that on purpose. I did it with Written on Skin. I did it with Let Me Tell You. I did it with Duty Correspondance. It's very rare that I will sing those pieces again. And with Hamlet, I may or may not sing it again. I don't know. It depends on where and how. But when I watch that, like, if in opera, you know, you have the conductor in front of you, but often you can't see him. Like all the stuff when I'm lying down, I can't see him. So I have to catch him out of a monitor, a TV screen on the side of the stage, on one or the other sides of the stage. And so there's all these moments when you make, like, I love opera also because it's just so collaborative. You know, a lot of the gestures I made were cues for Vlad. So I was cueing him for the conductor, Vlad Jurovsky. And at other moments, you know, I knew that I had to face front and center and lock eyes with him as opposed to catch him in the monitor. So there were all these agreements, you know, where you kind of re-anchor in a crazy scene like that. And it's the same with the ligeti, you know, I have with the conductors when I sing the ligeti, or with George Benjamin, you know, we have all these agreements when we lock in as conductor and singer, which is very special. I think there's a moment of ownership that is very important. And I think everybody, well, not everybody, but many musicians have that. Well, there's the moment of ownership, and then there's the moment of feeling like you've really arrived, or you really have a direct entry into music. And for me, the moment of ownership was around age 27. And it was when I was a really good student, and I always did what my teacher said, and I learned about the sound, and I learned that you always have to have an even vibrato for singers. Like an even vibrato has to be, you know, all the time, and you can't sing non-vibrato, and you can't mess around with it and bend pitches, forget about it, you know. And so I was a very good girl, very good student. And then when I was 27 and I was alone for a summer in Salzburg, had a small part in a show there, and I ended up practicing every day, and I started exploring sound and color in my voice that I even remember thinking, my teacher's not going to like this. She's not going to like this. And it was really important for me because I was preparing for my second master's degree recital. So I was still in school, but I was singing in Salzburg, which was kind of, I was always gigging and studying at the same time. And I knew I was going to get in trouble. And indeed, I did get a lower mark for my second master's recital from the piano because I broke some rules. And yet I was very proud of that performance, because it was more important for me. Again, this is what I said before, and maybe that's really the key. It was more important for me to sing the music the way I wanted to sing it and the way I needed to sing it than what my teachers told me and what was right, what was decided to be right by the tradition or by the pedagogy or whatever. It was that, and I couldn't break the rules until I was already kind of good enough that I knew what I was breaking. You know, it's not like a free for all. So it's this discipline that allows for spontaneity, or this discipline that allows for freedom, and in the sound making. And you know, when I see pianists, for example, you know, the ligeti piano, I think it's called musica ricercata, and it's only on one note, ba 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 ba. It's A, right? And then it ends on a D. So it's actually in D major or D minor. But anyway, and I watched a pianist doing it. She was a young pianist, and I could see all this technique in her hands. And it drove me crazy. Like, I hated seeing that, because there was this, and I would like, just bang it. Like, literally be aggressive, be the music. And the music is aggression. And I was working a little bit with her on it. And because it's also audio visual, I mean, the audience they listen with their eyes. And so there was something that I wanted her to stop being a good pianist and stop doing what her teacher told her about how to play repeated notes, but to really become a character who was obsessively playing these A's at the piano, and who was just aggressively, almost violently having some, for what reason does one need to repeat that note over and over and over and over again? And so, and that becomes ownership. That is the moment of owning that piece, that you become the music, that you become everything about the music, you become the character of the music, you know, and that music tells you how you have to play. The music gives you your technique. That's why I say, you know, composers have been my singing teachers. They gave me my technique. You know, they told me what they needed, and I had to figure out how to do it. And it wasn't my singing teacher that told me how to do it. You know, even now, of course, I still work with a singing teacher, and I'll come in and we'll work on stuff, and the lessons are really collaborative, and we have a lot of disagreements, not arguments, but just, you know, I'm going to do it like this. I know the right way to do it is like that. And yet probably in the performance, I'm going to do it like this, you know, and using adrenaline as a tool that will save me, keep me safe vocally, so I don't do any damage. So that's the ownership aspect. And then the other aspect is the entry into music. And because your question was like how to stay creative as performers. Well, I think when you're young, you kind of have to play everything, and you should play everything you've been offered in a way, to kind of develop what you like and what you don't like. But then there's a point when you know what your affinities are. It's like food. You know what you like, you know where you want to explore, and you know what you don't like. And so one needs to feed oneself the nutrition, as far as what is your desire for that. So this is extremely important, because if you can, and I think it's possible to a certain degree, maybe not 100%, but maybe 70%, it's possible to find a way to only play music that you are passionate about. And if you're not immediately passionate about something, find a way to be passionate about it. Find something in that piece that you will be passionate about in it. Because what you're looking for is that moment. And for me, it was around age 37, around 37, 38, maybe a little bit before, where I felt like I had a direct entry to music. Like I felt I was in all the time. And prior to that, I always felt like I would get into a piece, you know, whereas at that point, I just felt like in, and with any music, always in, 100% in all the time. But that took, I was 37. I've been making music since I was 5, or since I was 2 or 1 or whatever. But I mean, studying music and studying, and you go through the time when you have to follow all the rules and be the good student, and then you have to take the ownership, and then you have to develop that ownership and develop the passion until finally you're in. So it's a long-term relationship. And I think being true to your affinities of repertoire is extremely important. And so, of course, when I've done some pieces that I didn't love, like if I got a world premiere to do and I didn't adore it, I found something in it that I wanted or needed to work on that would make me want to do it, that would make me passionate about it, even if there was only a couple of pieces I really didn't like. And in one of them, I had to perform it. I think I had to do it 24 times. And so that was really not very pleasant. But every performance, I would set goals for myself, technical goals for myself. What do I want to achieve tonight? What would be the optimum? What would be the peak of this particular scene? So I always had something that was going to give me the urge, you know.